A royal showdown for the ages. Meghan Markle's explosive loose women clash that shocked the world. Imagine this: a glittering ITV studio, the air crackling with anticipation, cameras rolling, audience buzzing with excitement. Loose Women, the iconic British talk show, had just landed one of the biggest guests in its history, Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex. The stage was set for what should have been a polished, predictable chat about charity, work, empowerment, Meghan's new chapter in life. But what unfolded was nothing short of television chaos, a fiery, no-holds-barred confrontation that left jaws on the floor, security scrambling, the guests storming out in a blaze of fury. This is the story of how Meghan Markle's appearance on Loose Women turned into a clash so explosive it's still reverberating to the media. Buckle up, because you're about to dive into a 5,000-word roller coaster of drama, raw emotion, jaw-dropping revelations. Before we get started, hit that subscribe button, drop your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever seen a celebrity interview spiral this wildly out of control? Trust me, you won't want to miss a single word of this. The ITV studios in London were practically vibrating with energy on the day of the broadcast. The Loose Women team had pulled off a cool. Meghan Markle, the former royalhood, captivated the world with her fairy tale wedding to Prince Harry. Her bold exit from the monarchy, her unapologetic voice on global issues, was sitting in their guest chair. The producers knew they were sitting on a gold mine. This wasn't just another celebrity interview. This was a chance to peel back the layers of one of the most polarizing figures of our time. Would Meghan charm the audience with her polished charisma? Would she sidestep the tough questions with her trademark grace? Or would something entirely unexpected happen? Spoiler alert, it was the latter. It was glorious. As the cameras rolled, the familiar Loose Women theme music faded. Presenter Ruth Langsford flashed her warmest smile at the camera. Welcome back to Loose Women, she said, her voice brimming with enthusiasm. We're absolutely thrilled to have with us today a very special guest, Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex. Meghan, thank you so much for joining us. Meghan dressed perfection in a tailored cream blazer that screamed elegance, returned the smile with equal warmth. Thank you for having me, Ruth. It's wonderful to be here, she replied, her tone calm, confident. The audience leaned and captivated by her presence. For the first few minutes, everything went according to plan. Ruth steered the conversation through safe waters, touching on Meghan's charitable initiatives, her advocacy for women's empowerment, her latest projects. Meghan was in her element, delivering thoughtful answers with the poise of someone who'd faced 1,000 cameras before. The audience was eating it up, nodding along as she spoke passionately about her foundation's work to uplift marginalized communities, her plans to expand its global reach. But the air in the studio shifted when Ruth turned to the panel. Let's bring in our panelists, she said, her voice still bright, but with a hint of caution. We have Denise Welch with us today, along with Kay Adams, Janet Street Porter. Denise, you've been quite vocal about your thoughts on the royal family recently. What would you like to ask Meghan? The camera panned to Denise Welch, a Loose Women veteran known for her razor-sharp tongue, fearless approach to tough topics. Denise leaned forward slightly, her eyes locked on Meghan with an intensity that sent a ripple of unease through the studio. Her expression wasn't hostile, but it was calculating, like a chess player sizing up her opponent. Meghan, she began, her voice steady but laced with purpose, I have to ask, I think our viewers deserve honesty here. You've spoken extensively about your mental health struggles within the royal family, which we all sympathize with, but there seems to be a pattern where institutions you've been part of, whether it's the royal family or previous workplaces, somehow end up being portrayed as toxic environments. Have you ever considered that perhaps the common denominator might be worth examining? The studio fell deathly silent. You could almost hear the collective gasp from the audience, a sharp intake of breath that sucked the air out of the room. Meghan's smile flickered just for a split second before she regained her composure. I'm sorry, Denise, she said, her voice measured but with an edge of steel, but I think that's quite unfair when multiple people come forward about systemic issues within an institution. It's important to listen to those voices rather than questioning the integrity of the individual speaking out. Denise didn't flinch. She leaned forward a fraction more, her gaze unwavering. But that's exactly my point, isn't it? She pressed. Multiple people have also spoken positively about working within these same institutions. Your sister-in-law, Catherine, seems to thrive in the royal environment. Many of your former colleagues from Suits have remained silent about these alleged workplace issues. I'm just wondering if you've ever considered that perhaps the issue isn't always external. Meghan's posture stiffened, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The polished facade shed worn so effortlessly was starting to crack. Denise, she said, her voice now carrying a sharp edge, I think you're making some very dangerous assumptions here. Just because someone chooses not to speak publicly about their experiences doesn't mean those experiences don't exist. And comparing my situation to Catherine's is completely inappropriate. Our circumstances were entirely different. Whether though Denise countered her tone calm, but relentless, you both married into the same family under similar scrutiny, the difference seems to be in how you each chose to handle that pressure. Catherine found ways to work within the system, while you chose to publicly criticize it. I'm not saying either approach is wrong, but surely you can see how some people might question the narrative. Ruth Langsford shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her eyes darting. Between Meghan and Denise, perhaps we should move on, she started, but Meghan cut her off, her voice rising with a mix of defiant frustration. No, Ruth, I think this is exactly the kind of conversation we need to have. Denise, what you're suggesting is victim blaming plain simple. You're essentially saying that because I spoke out about racism, mental health struggles, am somehow the problem. That's exactly the kind of thinking that keeps these toxic systems in place. Denise shook her head. Unfazed, that's not what I'm saying at all. I think you know that. She said, her voice still maddeningly calm. I'm talking about accountability. Yes, you face challenges. Yes, some of those may have been due to unconscious bias or institutional failures. But you've also made very public statements that have been disputed by other family members. You've painted yourself as a sole victim in situations where there might be multiple perspectives. The tension in the studio was electric. Kay Adams, Janet Street Porter sat frozen, their faces a mix of shock, discomfort, clearly unprepared for the conversation to take such a volatile turn. Meghan's media training was being pushed to its limits as she fought to maintain her composure. Denise, she said, her voice trembling slightly, I have to say I'm quite shocked by this line of questioning. I came here today to talk about positive change, charitable work, not to be ambushed with accusations. The idea that I'm somehow responsible for the institutional problems I encountered is not only wrong, it's harmful to anyone who's ever tried to speak truth to power. But Denise was like a dog with a bone. Relentless, unyielding. I'm not ambushing you, Meghan. She said, her eyes narrowing slightly. I'm asking the questions that many of our viewers are thinking. You've had unprecedented platforms to share your story, from Oprah to Netflix to multiple interviews. You control the narrative completely, but narrative control isn't the same as truth, is it? And when people were actually there who witnessed these events provide different accounts, shouldn't we at least consider that there might be more to the story? Meghan's composure was fraying at the edges, now her voice rising with each word. The people who were there, Denise, were part of a system that was failing me. She shot back, of course, they're going to protect that system. That's exactly how these power structures maintain themselves, by discrediting anyone who dares to challenge them. Or, Denise said, her voice cutting through like a blade, maybe some of those people are telling the truth. Maybe the palace staff who said they felt bullied were actually telling the truth. Maybe the family members who felt blindsided by public accusations had legitimate grievances. Maybe, just maybe, the situation was more complex than the black-white narrative you presented. The word bullied landed like a grenade. Meghan's face flushed, her eyes flashing with a mix of anger, disbelief. How dare you bring up those discredited allegations? She said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. Those were investigative found to be without merit. You're repeating tabloid gossip, presenting it as fact. Denise leaned back slightly, a faint smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Were they found to be without merit, though she asked, her tone almost taunting, or were the result of that investigation simply never made public? There's a difference, isn't there? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Meghan's eyes widened, a flicker of panic mixing with her rage. Ruth Langsford tried desperately to regain control, her voice tinged with urgency. Ladies, perhaps we could focus on some of the positive work Meghan is doing with her foundation, she suggested. But both women ignored her completely. Denise, Meghan said, her voice now a dangerous whisper, I think you need to be very careful about what you're implying here. Those investigations were handled appropriately. I won't sit here allow you to perpetuate harmful rumors that have been used to attack me for years. But Denise was undeterred, her eyes gleaming with determination. I'm not implying anything, Meghan. I'm asking direct questions. If the investigation clear you completely, why not release the findings? Transparency would surely put all these rumors to bed once for all, unless, of course, the findings weren't as favorable as you'd like people to believe. Meghan snapped, her composure shattering like glass. Because some things are kept private to protect all parties involved, she exclaimed, her voice rising to a near shout. But your suggestion that I somehow escaped accountability is both insulting, completely wrong. Denise tilted her head, sensing weakness. Pouncing protected all parties, or protected you, she asked, her voice dripping with skepticism. Because from what I understand, the staff members who made those complaints didn't feel particularly protected. Some of them left their positions entirely. That doesn't sound like a win-win resolution. To me, Meghan's hands clenched into fists in her lap, her knuckles white staff. Turnover happens in every organization. She said, her voice shaking with barely contained fury. Denise, you're connected that don't exist, creating a narrative that serves your agenda, not the truth. My agenda, Denise laughed, but there was no warmth in it. Meghan, I don't have an agenda. Hear him simply asking the questions that responsible journalists should be asking. You spent years controlling your narrative through friendly interviews, carefully managed media appearances. Someone needs to ask the hard questions. Hard questions. Meghan's voice was practically vibrating with anger. Now her hands gesturing wildly. These aren't hard questions, Denise. This is a character assassination disguised as journalism. You're sitting here attacking me based on unsubstantiated rumors, gossip. Kay Adams finally found her voice, her tone cautious but firm. Perhaps we could all take a step back here, she said. This is getting quite heated. I think we're losing sight of why Meghan came on the show today. But Denise wasn't done, not by a long shot. Actually, Kay, I think this is exactly why these conversations matter, she said, her eyes still locked on Meghan. Meghan has built her entire post-royal brand on being the victim of an unfair system. But what if that's not the complete truth? What if there were legitimate concerns about her behavior that she's simply choosing to reframe as persecution? Meghan stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. The sudden movement startled everyone in the studio, including the audience, who let out a collective gasp. I will not sit here be attacked like this, she said, her voice trembling with rage. This is exactly the kind of treatment that drove me away from the United Kingdom in the first place. You're proving my point about the toxic media environment here. Sit down, Meghan. Denise said, her voice firm, unyielding. Running away when faced with difficult questions is exactly the pattern I'm talking about. You can't control this narrative the way you control your Netflix interviews or your podcast appearances. Sometimes you have to face uncomfortable truths. Meghan remained standing, her face flushed with anger. Uncomfortable truths. She shot back, her voice dripping with disdain. The uncomfortable truth is that you're a bitter woman who's built her career on tearing down other women. You're everything that's wrong with British media, everything that's toxic about this country's treatment of women. Who dare to speak up? The personal attack seemed to energize Denise rather than wound her. She leaned forward, her eyes blazing. There it is, she said, her voice sharp. When you can't answer the questions, you attack the questioner. That's your pattern, isn't it, Meghan? Anyone who challenges your version of events becomes a villain in your story, your version of events. Meghan's voice was shaking now, her polished exterior completely gone. My version includes documented evidence of racist coverage, mental health struggles that nearly drove me to suicide, a family that refused to protect me or my child. But sure, Denise, let's pretend that's all just my imagination. Denise stood up, too, matching Meghan's intensity. No, but it's dismissing your mental health struggles, she said, her voice steady but forceful. And nobody is saying the media coverage was always fair, but you can't use those real issues as a shield against any all criticism. You can't weaponize your pain to avoid accountability for your own actions. Weaponize my pain. Meghan's voice cracked on the words, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. How dare you minimize what I went through? You have no idea what it's like to be trapped in a system designed to break you down, and have your every move scrutinized, criticized by people like you who have never walked in my shoes. Ruth Langsford was now frantically gesturing to her producers off camera, her face a mask of panic. Janet Street Porter sat frozen, her mouth slightly open, clearly stunned by the train wreck unfolding before the audience was murmuring among themselves, some shocked, others riveted by the raw drama. You're right, Denise said, her voice still maddeningly calm. I don't know what it's like to be in your specific situation, but I do know what it's like to be held accountable for my actions. And I know, share your thoughts in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe.